when we talk about those what people think it's as abstract stories. Nice, we remember them in Ramadan. A clergy, a mullah would come and tell them. But the minute we walk out to the real life, we have different set of challenges. Here we keep the traditions, and here we keep real life. It will no longer work. It will not work. We have so much challenges ahead of us in our communities. We have Muslim cities, whether it's in Somalia, it's in Afghanistan, it's in Iraq. Many of them are breaking down. We have fitna, strife that is taking place, as you know, in Pakistan, in Iraq, and other places. And we have more to come. And if you really want to stay on the path, you then have to really clarify your points of reference and transcend, raise above what you've got. Your parents, as I said, going to the metaphor in the Quran, إِمَّا يَبْلُغَنَّ عِنْدَكَ الْكِبَرِ أَحَدُهُمَا أَوْ كِلَاهُمَا, when one of them gets too old and a bit outdated and cannot catch up with the challenges of today, فَلَا تَقُلْ لَهُمَا أُفٍّ وَلَا تَنْهَرْهُمَا. Don't despair, don't say forget it. Otherwise, if we do not help the young ones find a comfortable way to deal with our references and with the challenges, we will lose the younger generation. Back into the Arab Spring and its impact on the Shia world in particular. The most closest and strongest and obvious is what happened in Bahrain. What happened in other countries, as I said, I can talk about, but there is something very important about Bahrain. Bahrain is part of it has a long history. Small, beautiful island. I was there nearly 2 years ago. Predominantly Shia, they're Arabs. It's got independence in 72, 73. There was some claim about it by Iran, but people overwhelmingly voted that they want to become an independent state. And it had a ruling family that came from Saudi Arabia. And if you really want to know the history, why there is that family from Saudi Arabia, because the two tribes, 3 or 4 tribes who are in Bahrain, who are Shia, they had a fight amongst themselves. And the only way to have a resolution to that fight was to bring an independent arbitrary, and they brought that family Al Khalifa. And since then, Al Khalifa discovered that's a good way. When people fight, we have a foothold. So they had a foothold in Bahrain, and they kept on their influence in Bahrain in the last 150 years. There is a lesson here to be learned. When societies are divided, there is always a foothold for the other to step in. Be it when Muslims are divided, then there is somebody else comes in. Be it when a particular country is divided, there is an outsider coming in. And be it even within a small, tiny island like Bahrain, at that time had 80,000 people maybe. Somebody walked in, still ruled them. Following the Arab Spring, as I said, more than half the population of that island, more than half the population physically went in the street. And they were asking for a very simple thing. They were asking for a constitutional monarchy. You stay, we thank you for looking after us 150 years, but you cannot own the land and own the people. You just cannot do that anymore. It happened before, you cannot do it any longer. Very simple request. We want a constitutional monarchy like Britain maybe, by which we want to elect a government. We want to elect a prime minister. If he's no good, we can elect somebody else. And you know the events, what happened is there has been a Saudi army that went in, cracked down, arrested medical staff, university professors. A lot of them are in prison now and struggling. What you do not know is that prior to the Arab Spring, like all other governments, Bahrain had a public relation firm called, in a DC slang, a lobbyist. They had a public relation firm representing it in Washington, just to lobby, to make sure that it has a good image amongst American officials here. Today, That tiny little island, it's expensive to keep a lobbyist working for you. But that tiny island today has 6 lobbying firms, not 1, which is unheard of. They have 6 lobbyist firms, and their job is to defame and distort everything about Bahrain. What is the trick that they are using? And it's a difficult one. We all suffer. I personally suffered from it. The trick that they're using is to say those Shias are loyal to Iran and allies with Iran. And they are playing on the fact, okay, there is a fear in Washington from Iran going nuclear. There is a fear in Arab countries or in the region of Iran being too powerful. And that way they really confuse everything. To the Shia, raw feelings would come out, so people become more prejudiced and they feel more like Shia, and emotions rise up, not reason. And for the Americans, fear, and then they mix everything and they stay in power. This is how it's played. And as I said, I've talked about Bahrain because Nabil Rajab, somebody who I respect and I worked with, unfortunately today has been detained, so I have to speak those 2 extra words about Bahrain. The Arab Spring basically is not about politics. It's about a younger generation. People who have opened their minds and eyes to the rest of the world, and they want answers from their governments and from their societies, from their elders. And if we collectively, I'm speaking here in the US, I'm speaking about my generation, I'm speaking as a Shia, as a Muslim, if we collectively do not read those signs well and respond to them well, we are going to be part of what I call the fitna. We will be consumed by it. We will be reacting to it, but we will not lead it. Most of you studied physics. There is something called trajectory. If you throw a stone, you can more or less predict which way the stone is going, unless something intervenes with that stone to change its path. We're on a trajectory, and anybody can design and tell you where that trajectory is going. And unless some intervention is done by us, maybe through these meetings, maybe from the young ones who can pick up, maybe from the older ones, but unless that intervention takes place, we are heading towards a lot of trouble. I began with referencing Imam Ali, and I want to end up with some references to Imam Ali Alehissalaam. The years that he ruled, 5 years, were most troubling years, most troubling. Number 1, although he was best qualified to become the leader of the Ummah after the Prophet ﷺ, and when it didn't happen, he remained constructive, keen about the unity of the Muslim Ummah, keen. There is and I normally do not make too many references to hadith or history because it's difficult to verify the accuracy of these hadiths. But there are too many of them. And again, I do not want to quote some because it might lead to others, but there are many incidents where, without a doubt, you read them consistently. Imam Ali, although he was not in power as a ruler, but he was acting as the number 1 guidance to the Muslim Ummah in the way he acted. When the first crisis happened with Uthman, and eventually the fitna, it was about money and corruption, and the family, the bigger family, the Umayyah of Uthman, the bigger family, became rich out of this expanding Muslim Ummah. And a lot of Muslims got angry. This is not the teaching of Islam. You profit out of religion. You don't do that. This is not the teaching of Islam. And eventually, when the fitna happened and Uthman was threatened, and Imam Ali sent Al-Hasan wal-Hussein alayhim as-salam to defend Uthman from being killed, and he was eventually killed because they were overpowered. It was a moment of darkness, and people naturally rallied to Imam Ali. They said, please rule, otherwise we're in a big crisis. And he said, look, I can rule, but it's a contract, and I can only rule if you agree to the terms of the contract. And they said, what are the terms of the contract? He said, I rule your uprising, your anger, it's because of the Muslim money has been squandered and wasted. I agree. If you empower me, I will collect that squandered money from every person who took it, even if he used that money to buy a land or even pay a dowry and get married, pays it back to the Bayt al-Mal, to the treasury of the Muslims. They agreed. He said, we have a contract, I'll take it. And Imam Ali started ruling. And his first battle was with known people who he liked and was close to in Ma'arak al-Jamal. Basically what happened with Talha, with Zubair, is that he asked them to give the money back as pledged. And when they, like money, it's money. People, when they have it, they don't want to give it back, especially if they used it. That was the first of the battles. It was not a battle about power. It was a battle about a contract and about honoring what is right. And throughout those 5 years, there are so many guidance and lessons we need to have from Imam Ali, because we are going through a period of crises, fitna, too many of them. And we will have a lot of shaitanic points of reference that will confuse us. We'll have a lot of our own ignorance and ajiz, inability we have to go back to the references to be guided clearly and to seek guidance from those references. Famous incident during his battle with Al-Khawarij. It was on a Friday that Imam Ali was during Ramadan, during the battles with Al-Khawarij. Another group that split out of his camp started fighting him and eventually was killed. Imam Ali was killed by one of Al-Khawarij. He was giving his speech on a Friday during Ramadan, and within the crowd, and this is during war, one of the crowd calls Imam Ali names, saying, what a liar you are. You deceived. And he basically called abuse and insulted Imam Ali. And it was a wartime, war days, fighting days. So eventually people pulled their swords to kill him. He's an enemy in insulting Imam Ali during fighting time. And Imam Ali immediately stopped them. He said, look, how can you kill a person because he insults? He insulted me, and I have the right to insult him back. And I have the right to pardon him. Nobody has the right to kill him. And he said, I pardon him. I mean, just imagine. That is the leadership, that is the guidance we have. If you call yourself a Shia Imam Ali, Shia follower of Imam Ali, follow his act. It's not by name, it's by inspiration, it's by finding that guidance. One last thing I will say about, to just tie all this up with the Quran and with Imam Ali. Very recent, any of you, if you go to Barnes and Nobles or any other bookshop, and you go into the self-development section, you will see a lot of books recently written all about neurology and how the brain functions and how the brain works, and it's fascinating to read. And actually, if you read in those books as much as I've read, you will be most intrigued to see the influence of the Quran, those words, on the mind, because it's a fascinating subject to look at. And you look at it carefully and you wonder if really you have a fresh mind, somebody who is 10, 12 years old, those of you who know the subject, neurology, your brain wiring takes place, of course, before the age of 13, but after the age of 13, which is when more or less the full number of neurons, the brain cells, reach their maximum numbers in the brain. The rest is what is called brain wiring. They fire these nerves and they connect and they create your brain, your structure. And depending on what events you go through, what you feed it with, it defines the way you think and your personality. That's your brain, that's who you are. And you wonder, what happens if you were to have a brain that is fresh, that is more or less shaped by the Quran? What happens? Can we just envisage it? And as far as I know, the only person I can think of who had his brain or mind shaped by the Quran is Imam Ali. Because at the age of 12, when the revelation started to the Prophet, and he was with him, he was with his cousin, and every time those verses came, he believed them at that age, and he was there to receive them, and he was there to see them manifested, implemented by the Prophet throughout his life. Those words not only shaped him and he was there, he lived by them. And eventually, if you really want to see a Quran being manifested in a personality where a person would act and think the Quran, you would look and to Imam Ali as the inspiration. I think with those points of reference, I hope I've raised, as I said, and I've planted some seeds for thought. It's impossible to cover these topics just in one go, but from the bottom of my heart, I pray to Allah that we continue the good work, you continue the good work, and this would be blessed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and by the Prophet, and by the Imam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Kubba. That was a very nice analysis on the Bahrain crisis, as well as drawing a very good parallel between the character of Imam Ali and today's events and the lessons we can learn from Imam Ali. Thank you very much once again, Dr. Kubba. Our next speaker is Dr. Hassan Abbas. His topic is the role of education in encouraging tolerance and religious harmony in South Asia. Dr. Abbas is a master on facts of South Asia. He's a leading expert on South Asia and the terrorist organizations based in Pakistan, Afghanistan, and in that region. He's an accomplished scholar, media commentator, as well as an author. He was a research fellow at Harvard University and a fellow of the University of Social Policy and Understanding, an associate of the Pakistani Security